You've heard of the Ridge wallet, but have you heard of their latest breakthrough offering? It's called the Ridge Key Case, and it does for keys what the Ridge wallet did for wallets. Trust me when I tell you, it's hard to go back after using this one, and you can get 10% off your purchase when you use offer code SKILLUP over at ridge.com/skillup. Click the link below to grab one now, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Alrighty, Remnant 2. This is one that I got the chance to go hands-on with at the Summer Games Fest in LA a few weeks ago, and it was really important to me that I circled back to it for a few reasons. Number one, the first game, Remnant from the Ashes, was awesome. It was the first, or one of the first games to apply Souls-like design principles to a third-person shooter, while also splicing in a simple but effective loot game and some procedural map generation. So you had this real mishmash of ideas that could have been a bit of a hot mess, but it actually came together really well, and to this day, Remnant stands out as something really unique. There have been a couple of games that have tried to do what it does, but none have found anywhere near the same level of success. I also really like this studio, Gunfire Games. They did Darksiders 3, which I think a lot of people shat on because it was a budget title compared to the more ambitious Darksiders 1 and 2. But obviously this team were working within different constraints, and I think they used every dollar they had pretty well. Darksiders 3 was essentially a Souls light, and hence a very different type of game versus the Zelda-inspired Darksiders 2 or the character action-inspired Darksiders 1. Bottom line, I think the package came together better than most gave it credit for. So, back to Remnant 2. The other reason I wanted to circle back to this one after I returned home was that I really loved my time with it. There wasn't a huge amount playable at the Summer Games Fest, but of everything I played, this was probably the best of it. I had about 45 minutes hands-on playing side by side with the development team. I was playing on PC using a keyboard and mouse. I was not able to capture footage, unfortunately, but the team did provide some initial B-roll, and they've been kind enough to send through some additional B-roll in the last 24 hours, so what you're seeing here will include some new exclusive footage. So what's the TLDR on this? Long story short, it rules. It's more Remnant, only it looks way better. It has more classes, deeper class customization and identity, more active procedural generation, more enemies, more bosses, more loot, more everything. So far, it's shaping up to be everything I would have wanted, because Remnant was a fantastic, well-executed concept that felt quite lean in its offering. While each of its parts worked well, you got the sense that there was more to be squeezed out of each of them, and Remnant 2 aims to do just that. In a year of really massive flagship AAA bangers, Remnant 2 is something that I expect is going to sneak up and surprise a whole bunch of people, just the same way the first one did. Just in case you haven't played the first game, let me give you a brief primer. It's Dark Souls, but with guns, basically. You picked one of 3 starter classes, but that choice didn't really matter as your build was essentially determined by the types of weapons and armor you equipped, and you were always free to equip whatever you please later on. There was a story-driven campaign, but it was pretty light on the narrative front. Much like Dark Souls, it was more about world building and lore than anything else, and all of that played second fiddle to the action. There was an overworld which you were moving through, and that was static, but peppered throughout it there were various dungeons. Each of these were procedurally generated, but it was a pretty limited tile set. You'd see some variations this way or that, but they felt pretty minor rather than wholly different layouts. Think Returnal more than Diablo or Warframe, for example. You'd progress through these dungeons, kill a major boss, collect some parts off them which you can use to craft a new weapon, and then you'd press on to the next challenge to do it all over again. It was tough, but definitely a lot easier than your average Souls-like, since the focus was on the game being fun and accessible, rather than being a grueling test of your gamer resolve. It could be played solo, which made it much more difficult due to the absence of party revives and the fact that enemies were all focused exclusively on you, but you could also play up to 3-player co-op, which was absolutely the best way to enjoy it. So that primer is actually really useful because we can actually go through each part of it bit by bit and see how Gunfire Games have tweaked different parts of that formula, either in response to feedback on the first game or out of a desire to just make something newer, bigger, and better. Arguably the biggest change the game delivers is in class design. In the previous game, there weren't really classes per se, they were just starting options focused on short, medium, or long-range combat, and like I said, you could equip whatever you wanted anyway later on in the game. So things are very different here in Remnant 2. Right now we know there are 4 classes coming at launch, and they are very much classes, and while you can still equip whatever weapons and gear you like, each of these classes will have unique abilities and traits that other classes don't have access to. So what are those classes? Well, in the more familiar camp, you've got the Gunslinger. It's your classic cowboy fantasy. He's got a 6-shooter and an old-timey rifle, and his focus is on dealing as much damage as possible. His main talent allows him to immediately reload his guns, and his abilities are all about giving him big bursts of damage throughput, like turning his semi-automatic weapons into automatics, or fanning the hammer of his 6-shooter, etc. You also have very deep ammo reserves, so this guy is going to be your DPS workhorse. Still sticking with the more familiar formula is the Challenger class. This is meant to be an up-close and personal tanky boy. He's naturally drawn to stuff like melee combat and shotguns because he's able to wear heavy armor without being greatly encumbered by it. He also has a whole bunch of abilities that make him damage resistant while increasing his damage output, with one that even sends him berserk if he racks up enough kills. So those two classes are quite in keeping with what the previous game was doing, because Remnant wasn't offering a kind of holy trinity of tank, healer, DPS. It was more about where you were dealing your damage from, close, medium, or long range. It's quite different here in Remnant 2, as evidenced by these two other classes. The first up is the Medic, which is, it's a heal bot. They can still deal damage with their weapons, but their abilities are entirely focused on healing their teammates, casting barriers to protect them, or rezzing them faster if they go down. The more healing the Medic outputs, the more he's able to heal himself, creating this nice feedback loop. He's also got an ultimate ability style thing that will instantly revive any down player in your party and apply a massive heal over time, clearly intended to be a very potent oh shit button in a sticky situation. Redesigning classes this way definitely makes for a more interesting set of interactions, but it also brings with it the risk that the game becomes even more leveraged into co-op play, meaning it wouldn't be at all fun to play solo. That was a bit of a problem with the first game, depending on your appetite for difficulty. Remnant 1 was way harder when you played it solo, to the point where it felt like a totally different game, and doubling down on that in a sequel probably wouldn't have been a great move. Luckily, it seems like Gunfire have thought about that. Enter the Handler class. It's a companion class where you and your very good boy stare down the forces of darkness together. Your doggo has 3 different stances, if you could call them that. One of them makes him a tank, and he'll be both more resilient and he'll draw more aggro. The other makes him a lightweight heal bot, providing moderate healing to nearby allies. And finally, he has a straight DPS stance that'll buff party members' damage as well as his own. Most important of all, he can res you if you go down while you are playing solo. And that was one of the biggest things that made the first game so much more difficult when playing solo, because the margin for error was so slim when you didn't have any teammates to revive you. So that's probably going to be the class to play if you're looking to play solo, and it solves one of the biggest issues with the first game. More broadly, I think this new approach to class design has the potential to really deepen the overall combat framework, since you're no longer just thinking about spraying as many bullets as possible or where you're shooting them from. You're thinking much more about your specific role within your squad and the utility you can provide. But class design gets even crazier later on when you can unlock the ability to run dual classes. This is basically what it says on the tin. It's splicing together any 2 classes you like, and while you still only have access to the main perk of your primary class, you do get to select the abilities and passives of a secondary class. This kind of feature is a little more complex, certainly not something I could get to grips with in a 45-minute preview session, but it is something I'm looking forward to checking out when the game launches. Speaking of which, I played through 2 classes during my demo. The first was the Challenger class, and he's a hell of a lot of fun to play. He had the spiky, oversized sword that you saw in the trailer. Swinging it felt great, hit detection was really good, melee animations were smooth. I was also using the shotgun, which felt excellent, great feedback and sound. For my second run through, I played as the Gunslinger, and he was just as much fun to use. He's all about dealing damage at range, lots of headshots and precision damage. I noticed how generous the aim assist was even when playing on PC. It was extremely easy to hit headshots because enemy hitboxes were pretty huge and forgiving. It's consistent with the previous game's approach to difficulty, which is that it's trying to be tough, and it is, but it's also trying to make you feel powerful and in control. Those iframes during the dodge are very generous. Enemy telegraphs continue to be very clear and readable. Weak spots present often and are easy to hit. Remnant isn't trying to ground you down and break you. It has Souls-like elements, but it's ultimately an empowerment fantasy, a stark contrast to what most Souls-likes are built on. That, combined with the ability to play co-op, make it a very inviting title, I think. Don't be scared off by this one, for real. There are different difficulty options, there's different build pathways, there's co-op, there's lots of ways into this. So if you're someone that's typically a little intimidated by Souls-like difficulty, then this may be a really nice entry point into the subgenre. Speaking more specifically about my hands-on session, one of the things that struck me most was just how good this game looks. This is a massive, massive step up over the first game, which looked pretty good back then, but it certainly wasn't in the running for any awards for visuals or presentation. Here, it's a very different story with vastly more detail on character models, way more particle effects, and a totally different approach to lighting, making spaces feel more layered, I guess. That's a good word for it, actually. Environments in the first game had a really flat quality owing to their basic textures and their lack of responsive lighting. Here in Remnant 2, there's so much bioluminescence which produces these really interesting fill effects in each space. Incidentally, I was told I was playing on an RTX 3090 and I was at 4K resolution, and the game was running absolutely flawlessly. I was surprised at how well it was running, in fact, and I spoke to the devs about it, and they were all too happy to boast about how well optimized the game is and how well it runs on different systems. Obviously, we'll need to see for ourselves how that shakes out at launch, but hopefully the final product ends up running as well as my preview build did, because yeah, it was actually extremely impressive. I got to explore 2 different biomes during my playthrough, both of which were quite similar to locations you would have found in the first game. The first was a swampy sort of section interspersed with wooden structures. The second was a ruined temple, plenty of stone corridors buckling under the weight of the overgrowing corruption. There are plenty more locations coming as well. The developers have put up a bunch of trailers on their YouTube channel showcasing spaces that look quite distinct from the first game, which is really nice to see. While I was playing through these spaces myself, I got the chance to ask the developers about the procedural generation that's at work and how that's changed this time around. And along with the class rework, this is probably the biggest change coming in this sequel. So procedural generation is back, and Gunfire has said that we should expect a more active form of procedural generation that will deliver a greater diversity of layouts than we saw in the first game, which is good because it was a little bit limited the first time around. But the really interesting thing about Remnant 1's procedural generation was that it wasn't just about layouts, it was also about things like side quests and boss locations. You can arrive at a location you've been to before in a previous playthrough, and this time there's a new NPC quest giver that wasn't there before, and the final boss in that dungeon might be completely different as well. Remnant 2 takes all of that and brings it up a level, applying this procedural generation to main story questlines now, while also completely randomizing the order in which you might discover new locations. Now when you begin a new playthrough, the beeline golden path of your playthrough is going to be heavily remixed, whereas in Remnant 1, it kind of felt like it was sort of tinkering around the edges. Gunfire has said that it's possible for you to do 2 complete playthroughs without seeing a single repeated element. That is a very bold claim. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm sure that's a real Goldilocks scenario, but unless Gunfire are totally lying out their ass, I think it does speak to an ambition that's sure to make itself felt in some way, shape, or form. If it comes together, like they claim, then Remnant 2 is going to feel like a roguelike as much as it's a Souls-like, and if they can nail that combination, then that's going to be a pretty unique and compelling package. So the details for this one, it comes out pretty soon actually, July 25th for Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. It is coming to Steam, which is nice. It's not coming to Game Pass though, or if it is, that hasn't been announced yet. Good news though, it's a discount title. It's only around 75 Australian dollars, so it should be around 40-ish US dollars. The previous title was also slightly discounted versus your average AAA release, and it felt like one of the best bang for buck titles of the year. The campaign was a solid 20 hours and there was plenty of replay value beyond that. There was also some DLC drops that arrived later on and they were excellent as well. From the jump, I felt like Remnant 2 was a pretty safe bet since this team really know what they're doing, and Remnant 1 was a fantastic starting point. You could definitely see how it had places to go, and Remnant 2 looks to be going to those places. Its class design is way deeper, it has way more identity, it's way more customizable, and it solves that solo player problem which hurt the first game. The procedural generation stuff was a nice addition in the first game, but here it's far more ambitious, and it has the potential to give you plenty of reasons to keep playing well after that first playthrough. Visually, it's a huge glow up, and hopefully that impressive PC performance holds for release. Most importantly, the fundamentals are still there. Awesome gunplay, satisfying melee, a really well-balanced approach to difficulty, interesting enemy and boss design, and plenty of cool gear to collect and customize. So, quite hyped about this one to be honest, but the bad news, for me personally at least, is that I am going to be away on vacation when this thing drops. I'm going to be taking a 4-week family holiday. It is the first proper holiday that I've taken with my family for years, and I'm very excited about it. But I'm also thinking about you guys, and also how we keep the channel warm while I'm away. So I'm very pleased to announce that my editor, Austin, will actually be reviewing this one, and he'll be uploading that review to my channel. Austin has a background in game dev. He has his own YouTube channel that's focused on some MMO game none of us have heard of before. I think it's called Guild Warriors or something. And Austin also has a huge amount of insight when it comes to games. I really enjoy talking to him about what we're each playing, and I think you guys will enjoy hearing from him just as much as I do. He's going to be helping out with a few reviews while I'm away, and Remnant 2 will be one of them. So I hope you'll show him plenty of love when that one drops on the embargo. I'm sure you'll love it. For now though, thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the Frames Per Second podcast. See ya. By this point, we've all seen Ridge wallets somewhere, whether it's here on this channel or elsewhere across the intertube, since Ridge are big into the whole influencer marketing thing. They get good people sprucing their stuff because they make good stuff. The Ridge wallet is an excellent product that I've used for years because it has top tier build quality and it solves a problem that's always pissed me off. Big bulky wallets that take up too much space in your pocket and just look terrible. So it makes a lot of sense that Ridge have turned their attention to the other big bulky thing in your pocket, the keys. And with the new Ridge key case, you'll never again go back to carrying around a big, bulky, noisy set of keys. The Ridge key case holds up to 6 keys and it keeps each of them in the same order, stacked neatly on top of each other, all of them folding away into a single casing that is so small and so sleek that you barely even notice when it's in your pocket. There's a whole range of color options, including carbon fiber and burnt titanium, and Ridge are so confident in this product's reliability that it comes with a lifetime warranty. How many products you purchase these days that come with a lifetime warranty? Not many. I've used this key case for a while now and I love it. I could never go back to the old noisy clump of pointy keys sticking into my thigh as I walk around. It's the same story as the Ridge wallet. It's so much sleeker, so much more durable, fits so much more comfortably on the body. The days of the bulky leather wallet are gone for me and they will not be making a return. That is the power of Ridge across all their products. Key cases, wallets, their excellent backpack, their pens, whatever they do, it's great stuff, and wouldn't you know it, Ridge are friends of the channel, providing loyal ShillUp enjoyers with a 10% discount if you use offer code SkillUp when you visit ridge.com/skillup. That's ridge.com/skillup and use offer code SkillUp at checkout for 10% off your purchase. Thanks Ridge for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.